It's tabletop time. I'm Dave, and today we are going to be painting space Egyptian robots. That's right, some NOTCRONS. This video is sponsored today by One Page Rules, and I'm going to be painting some of the models from their Patreon for use in their game. Now, Tabletop Time only regularly started uploading videos again at the start of 2021, but in that time there is one video that I certainly think back on where perhaps we misrepresented ourselves. And that video is, of course, painting Rob's Necrons.
Do better.
Great.
Highly toxic fumes. Bye, shitty Necron.
I mean, it was a joke. It was a joke he was in on. It was a joke he maybe suggested.
It was Rob's idea to smash the mini.
I haven't heard him say anything yet.
It's Rob's idea.
He looks so sad.
But that's beside the point. I have to rectify things. I have to return him more models. I have to make something for Rob. Hopefully he can enjoy this tutorial as a full dive in how to paint the Cloaks dynasty. So I grabbed these models, put them into my slicer, flipped a couple of them on the x-axis for some variety, and then printed them out. They came out clean and crisp with only one or two imperfections caused by the 3D printing process. Layer lines barely noticeable. These with a lick of paint will be super passable on the tabletop. Now, painting black is traditionally very difficult, and one of the reasons it can be difficult to paint and certainly difficult to photograph is that you want the surface to finish black, but you also want to have depth in it. You want to have highlights, you want to have dark areas. So the secret is generally to not paint black. Most amazing paint jobs, yes, are not truly painted black. They're painted in grays or perhaps in tones similar to the light source hitting the black, such as very dark greens or blues. And that was what was flavoring my color scheme today. The Cloaks dynasty have energy effects that are bright blue, so I wanted to keep the icy blue color scheme. To that end, I airbrushed down some Vallejo Stormy Blue. I airbrushed this color focusing as a zenithal highlight, but being fairly broad in its application. I was quite happy for this blue to tint at least half of the black elements on this model. Once I'd done that initial spray with the airbrush, I came in once again with a brighter mix of blue and focused more heavily towards the upper angles. These two blue tones and the initial black undercoat really set the scene for what I was going for with the black armor. To put the finishing touches on the angled highlights, I dry brushed down somber gray across all of the black areas of the Necrons, focusing from the top and then with that done, I used a brush to line highlight the same color paint to make sure it was thick and clear in the areas towards the top of the model that I wanted it to be quite obvious. With these initial tones set down and the black starting to look closer to what I imagined it would at the end of the project, I went back to my airbrush and did a few sprays of brighter blues on the shield around these energy nodes that they have on the models. This quickly built up an effect of source lighting. It's less effective when you're laying down the colors on top of existing colors, but when you're dealing with monochromatic, the simple airbrushing of source lighting effects can be a really quick way to achieve good results. One of the things I adore about these One Page Rules models is the cloaks. Now, these particular models, the guards with the shields and the blades, have raggedy cloth elements on them, which just adds so much texture and momentum to a faction that doesn't usually have it. I love the weathered look of these robes, and it was an opportunity to add a big pop of that white color that the Cloaks dynasty utilize in their specialist unit. Now, I shaded this with quite a drastic approach, using the underside of the model and a darker shade of gray, and almost going for a comic book-esque approach where it was just a sudden change between the highlights and the shades, and it's really striking, and I think it works very well. There are a few areas where it was a bit more unclear where the termination line of that should be, and in those areas I mixed a small blend of the two colors, the highlight and the standard color, and just sort of feathered it out and made that that blend look a little bit more smooth. To finish up and sell the effect of the tattered cloth, I went in with an icy blue and stippled on my highlights on all the raised areas of that cloth. This has become my new go-to technique for highlighting textured fabrics in army paint job quality builds. I think that it is a very quick way to highlight something while also simulating a bit of texture, and it's something I've been going back to more and more when painting for armies. Now, something I'm really enjoying about this paint job is, aside from the airbrush elements, this is something that is super achievable for anyone at home. So if you were keen on painting the Thoct dynasty, I think you could follow this guide along and do it very easily. And even in these horrible times around the world, through amazing companies like One Page Rules, you could potentially do this all in the comfort of your own home. That's right, voiceover Dave. One Page Rules is a miniatures company that produces minis and rules for game systems in settings such as grim dark future and age of fantasy. These far out there game sets will be very easy for you to learn and play, and they have free rules available online. But there's more available if you join their Patreon. That's right, every month they're putting out new minis and they put out new rule sets. If you like those settings and games, all right, we interrupted my interruption for my sponsor read to get a coffee. I was just delivered a coffee right in the middle of this, and I thought you should know that. So there you go. It's a good coffee. Almost as good as the awesome miniatures available from One Page Rules. If you don't have a 3D printer, you can actually buy their models from their Etsy store. So pretty much all bases are covered. So if perhaps you'd like to emulate the exact project I've done on the channel here today, or perhaps you're just looking to get some really cool alternate minis for your games, or start an entire new army for their game system, go check out One Page Rules on their Patreon or on their Etsy store. The value on these Patreons is absolutely outstanding. For $10 US a month, you are getting like over 50 model files. And also, current Patreons get 70% off their existing files. It's just super sweet value and really cool company, and I cannot wait to see what they do next. So thank you to our sponsor, One Page Rules, and go check it out today, everyone. With these elements drying, I went down to the base and put a hexed lichen purple all over it. Just slap that on. While the hexed lichen was drying on the base, I came in with some black metal by Scale 75 and painted the underskeleton of this robot, leaving the higher armored areas that I'd already painted and dry brushed with the blacks and the blues untouched. With the skeletal frame painted, there was a Nuln Oil wash applied to give it a bit of depth and hide away that shiny detail so it blended into the silhouette of the model. Now you'll notice I've started being very paint agnostic. Citadel wash, Scale 75 metallic, Vallejo paint. It's fun to have lots of tools at your disposal. I don't know, that's kind of worth putting in there. Now, as Rob had asked for purple under the base and then crackle paint, I went on and slathered a Grelin Earth on top, which would ultimately crackle and leave it ready for me to turn into the icy tundra that we are basing these models on. Going back and forth between base and model while the different elements were drying was a very efficient way to keep painting and moving through this project without having to stop. There was one more area on the bulk of the model that needed to be painted: a glowing sword and some source lighting effects. To do this, I wet blended and haphazardly slapped on a whole bunch of different blues and whites, building up to a concentrated highlight towards the circular nodes that can be found on these models. On the shields, I just concentrated this effect into the crevices, painting a blue and then highlighting off to the edges with a white. This effect makes it look like there's perhaps a pulse of energy going down this shield. I think it works rather well. I went in and painted all the nodes with one of these sweet alchemy paints by Scale 75, then highlighted them with a very bright silver. Now I'd say this sword is a really good example of how you can rapidly get energy effects on power swords and things like that in what effectively feels like cheating. I'm just slapping paints down. I'm not trying to make it look blended or fantastic, but where it all comes together is when you simply get your maximum highlight color and line highlight all the edges of the blade. Now with the glowy swords and glowy shields done, I also made sure to get in with a blue and a highlight of white for those eyes to sell a glowing effect in the faces and draw the focal point back towards the head of the models. At this stage as well that I went in with white, mixed it with my gray and added a few point highlights around the head and shoulders just to bring more focus and attention towards the center of the model. Now to finish off these models was the bases. I dry brushed on grays and whites to build up the effect of a tundra or snow while leaving small traces of the Agrellan earth color as dirt showing through it. This 3-color texture ended up looking really good, but ultimately the effect was fully sold when I grabbed some Gamer's Grass tufts, stuck them on the bases, and then finishing touched everything with some Valhallan Blizzard, some ice that had settled all over the model and also on the base. And here he is, the man himself that started it all. It's Rob. We've got Rob.
Hey. Ooh, fair.
I painted you some sweet robots. What do you think?
They turned out so well from like the original prints themselves. It's hard to kind of visualize until you put the paint scheme on. I mean, I guess that's why you test your paint schemes. They've turned out really nice though.
I have done the airbrushy bits, but here is your next squad. One has snapped in half, very good.
He'll be fine. Well, thank you. That's actually really exciting. I'm keen to follow along and see how I go.
And hopefully out there you too can follow along and paint the Thoct Dynasty. We hope you've enjoyed the video. Hey, thank you to our patrons. Thank you to them. Look, they've been here the whole time, I'm assuming. They've been squishing us, rolling around with us, hanging out with us. And thank you to One Page Rules for sponsoring this video. Make sure you check out their Patreon and get some of your own NOTCRONS. I mean, Egyptian space robots.